All right. So my name is Michael Weinberg. I'm the president of the Economic Institute here at the Bay Area Council. It is Regional Economic Profile Day, which is sort of Christmas morning if you're a think tank president. So thank you so much for sharing it with us. We're going to kick off the day with the president and CEO of the Bay Area Council, Jim Wunderman. So please welcome Jim to the front.
Hey, so good morning everyone, and welcome to the Bay Area Council. And this is a great day, the 10th report that's been issued between the Bay Area Council with strong support of McKinsey over the years, and it's been, I think it's been a very successful venture for us to continually understand and study and look at the underlying impacts of policy on the Bay Area economy. It's been a strong story for most of those 10 years. We've had some, we've definitely had some ups. We've had a few downs. We've tracked them all. I think we have a, you'll see from this, we have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. There's no, this isn't just an academic effort, although there's some academics in the room, and we appreciate that. But this is the intention of this report is to make it all actionable. So the Bay Area Council, as a economic and business policy group, uses this information as a way to direct the advocacy of the organization and to think about how we need to, what kind of strategies we need to implement to be able to address the things that we learn from this. So as you'll see, as you probably already read in the Chronicle, most of the story's out. You can actually all go home. I'll give you a copy of it. You can read it because it told the whole thing. But we'll probably get into a little more depth this morning. It's a very, very positive story for the Bay Area. That's what the headline says. But there's, as you see this, there's a deep caveat. And it's a factor or two in many factors that define the Bay Area economy. But I would put forward to you, it's not just another thing to be put on the same par with other things. The situation we have that's driven by the lack of housing is really taking its toll, and the implications for the future of the region, I think, are very, very serious. When you have the strongest economy that anybody has, and at the same time you're effectively losing local population, that's a very serious situation. And we need to probably be thinking about doing things differently, because the way we've been doing them this isn't a new thing that we've identified and said suddenly that we have a housing problem in the Bay Area. We've been saying it for a long time. We've been putting forward policies for a long time, legislation, some of it's even passed, but the toughest stuff never really seems to make it. And I would say, it's time for really smart people like all of the folks who are in this room and others to kind of come together around perhaps a different set of strategies. I would extend this to transportation as well. We built a great region, but we haven't built much of it lately. We did it a while ago, and then at some point we kind of slowed down, and we need to really think about that. And it's a hard thing to think about it because people like things the way they are, and there's a huge resistance to change. But change is what we must do if we want to continue on this forward path. And as other regions of the world and history have seen, there's no guarantee. It's a beautiful place with a lot of beautiful, very, very smart people and institutions, but those things themselves don't guarantee us continued positive forward movement that we've seen in the past. So I commend you to look very, very carefully at this and work with our organization to help identify solutions, maybe ones that aren't on the table today. Maybe we need to look at things a little bit differently. I'm encouraging our team and our members to think a little bit differently about this because the situation calls for it. With that, let me turn it back over to President Weinberg, who will introduce our colleagues from McKinsey and enjoy the presentation. And I believe this is largely meant to be a conversation. I heard that said, so we'll try to make it that way. Thanks, everybody, and I look forward to this morning.
Jim's going to be more the bad cop today. I'm going to be more the good cop because I'm going to be talking a lot about how amazing things are. But in that, we clearly don't need to. We clearly can't miss Jim's warning that we can't take these good times for granted, and we need to double down on our housing and transportation strategies. So I'd like to turn over the podium to a couple of our colleagues, our partners in this project, actually since the beginning of the project 20 years ago. Have been McKinsey & Company, actually the current chair of the board of the Economic Institute, Kaushik Rajgopal, who wasn't able to make it this morning, but who is the Western Region Manager for all of McKinsey. 20 years ago was an associate working on the regional economic profile. So clearly working on the Bay Area Council Economic Institute's regional economic profile really provides rocket fuel for your career at McKinsey. So I'm glad to have this partnership, and I'd like to turn the podium over to Alexis and Kunal. Thank you.
So it's such a pleasure to be with all of you today. As was noted, this is the 10th collaboration we've had across McKinsey and the Bay Area Council. And I'd say it's deeply rooted in a shared belief about the power of data and information, and the need we have, even more so today than ever before, to really ensure that all of the decisions we're making and the choices about how we shape the future of the Bay Area are rooted in a deep understanding of what drives the economics, what drives the success, and also what drives the challenges that we see. And we're very excited about this collaboration, about what it shows about the strength of the Bay Area community and the areas that we still need to focus. McKinsey's third office, actually, globally was in the Bay Area in San Francisco. I like to think it was a realization over 70 years ago of the power that this region has to sustain in its importance. And now with over 100 locations, it still remains one of our vibrant and most important areas of focus for us within the firm. And we often get asked by clients about what is it that makes the Bay Area environment so unique. We host hundreds of executives actually who come from all over the world just to experience Silicon Valley. And once we explain to them, first of all, it's not one town with a downtown, but it's actually this whole vibrant region. And I think as this report shows, an ever-growing kind of outer circle of important communities as well. They're really amazed by just the magic that comes together across the innovation, the companies that are born here, the talent, and the ecosystem that it creates. And so for me, that was one of the things that I think stood out most in this year's report, was really an appreciation of just the halo effect that all of that has, and the desire that folks all over the world have to look to the Bay Area to understand the path to the future. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Kunal to just share a few of his highlights from the session, but just want to thank you all for being here.
Great. So as we heard at the outset, there's been no shortage of news coverage of the challenges that the region faces today. One of my favorite lines in the introduction to the report is, there's been a whole cottage industry that has developed around predicting, our region's demise, right? And it's for good reason. We face a lot of challenges, and the growth that we've had over the past 50 years is actually pretty unprecedented from a historical standpoint, right? So there's a real question around whether we can build the systems, whether we can enact the policies, whether we can develop kind of the shared sense of culture and aspiration to sustain that growth, or whether we're actually going to buckle under the weight of that kind of rapid trajectory. And so we started this year's report by asking a very simple question amongst ourselves, which is, has the Bay Area peaked? And the answer is no. Now, that's not to discount that the challenges that we face, we'll talk about that in a second. And they're very serious, and it doesn't mean that we're for sure going to continue on the upswing. But for now, we think that the assets and the advantages that we have as a region give us a real opportunity to continue its growth if we can collectively tackle the challenges that we face. So I just want to share a few of the highlights of what are those assets, what are those ingredients of our success that really stood out from this year's research. So the first is that, contrary to mainstream perceptions, the Bay Area is much more than tech. And I think we know that by the folks sitting in this room. We have the third largest concentration of Fortune 500 companies in the Bay Area, which dwarfs other regions of a similar size. And it's interesting, as digitization hits every single industry, we see not only the Bay Area being a net exporter of jobs to other regions, really helping to grow other economies in the Midwest and elsewhere, but also that companies from around the world are setting up their innovation labs and research facilities here. Right? So GM recently opened an R&D facility here. Walmart, AP InBev, just around different sectors, you have folks setting up shop here. And so there's a real strength in our industry diversification. The second thing is that we still have all the ingredients that go into making the next Fortune 500. Right? So we have a fifth of the patents granted nationally go to inventors in the Bay Area. We have more graduates who want to lead entrepreneurial ventures than other similar regions. We have if we think about all the venture capital that's deployed in next generation technologies, whether it's AI, big data, machine learning, half of that is invested here in the Bay Area. And lastly, something we were just talking about earlier is increasingly competition to the Bay Area is not coming from one particular city, it's coming from large regional clusters. Right? We see that in the Northeast, we see that in the Texas Triangle, the Northwest Corridor, and increasingly we're seeing greater integration with the Northern California megaregion. So 150,000 workers every single day cross sub-regional boundaries coming from Sacramento, from Monterey, from the Central Valley into the Bay Area. You see residents from the Bay Area actually moving out given some of the high housing costs, but they're not necessarily going to outside the state, they're going to the outer regions of the Northern California megaregion. This, as noted before, presents a lot of challenges around housing, around affordability, around transportation. Our commuters spend more time in transportation than, I think it's 40% more time in traffic since 2013. And we have some of the highest housing costs. But we have this opportunity as a mega region, this kind of broader canvas to look at to tackle some of these challenges. And so, as Micah said, it's with a caveat that we say that we're optimistic about the future. We think there's a lot of opportunity to continue the growth trajectory that we've been on. And what we hope this report does is launch a conversation for all of us of how do we collectively ensure that we put in place the things that we need to do to confront the challenges to ensure that we can sustain that growth. So we're excited for you to dig into the details of the report and for the conversation after that.
Great. All right, thanks, y'all. So, Jim promised a conversation, and a conversation it will be. And I want to point out some of the folks who will be a part of the conversation. And first, I'd like to welcome a couple of our international visitors. We have Consul General Tomochida Uyama from Japan. Thank you so much for being here. From the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Director, Ivanhoe Chang. So, I wanted to call them out in particular because of one of the things we'll be talking about today, which is that international trade, exchange of ideas, immigration are really one of the things that powers the Bay Area. So you are just as important a part of our community as anybody else, and thank you so much for being here. I'd also like to call out the team that put this report together. So I'm the guy that hangs around and barks at them. But there's a fantastic team working on your behalf, and I'm going to bring them into the conversation as well as we have this. And my colleagues from McKinsey, some of the folks from the Bay Area Council, as we think not only about these data, but as Jim said, the implications of these data for our collective work together. So here we have Jeff Belisario, our Vice President, and Mr. Megaregion, as we call him. We have Patrick Callerman, our Research Director, particularly expert in issues around the future of work and automation, AI. We have Alice Bishop, one of our research analysts, who is now becoming the world's leading expert on the city of Fresno. And Esteban Lopez, who has recently joined as a research analyst and is working on a lot of our projects, including some of our economic inclusion work, because making this Bay Area economy work not only for the venture capitalists but for everybody is a huge part of the mission of the Bay Area Council. We have one of our friends and partners, Ronnie Berger from Leaders Up here, who's been working with us on that work. And then Sean Randolph, where is Sean? Sean is over there. Sean is our international man of mystery, actually probably the globally best known member of the Bay Area Council family, expert on lots of different things, including public-private partnerships and infrastructure investment, but especially well known for his work on international trade connections. Right now we are doing projects that Sean is leading on China, Singapore, Canada, and India simultaneously. So those and other countries should be a part of the conversation today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of these slides, but you can read about it in the Chronicle, you can take it home. I'm sure that this will be on your bedstand for the next several months as you're memorizing every word of this white paper. But I'd love for this to be a conversation. So please raise your hand. We'll get a conversation going. Just let us know who you are, what company or organization you represent, and we'll just talk here for the next 45 minutes or so. And hopefully it'll be a good vehicle to power our collective action together. So let's get started, should we, with the headline. We are a top 20 economy in the world. If we were a country, congratulations everybody. This is up from 21 just a couple of years ago. The total economic output of the Bay Area has now risen to that level, but I also want to call your attention to the rate of growth. We've been growing at over 4% here in the Bay Area. So if, let's see, the Netherlands doesn't watch out, we're coming for it. We're coming for the Netherlands. Those Europeans, they gotta get their act together. But Mexico and Indonesia are next. All right. It's also important to say that the Bay Area really just roared out of the Great Recession very quickly. When you look at the total economic activity in the Bay Area. But it's actually been only fairly recently that, over the course of the last few years, that the Bay Area has really begun to outpace the rest of the United States, not just in terms of the economic output, but also in terms of the jobs that we have here in the Bay Area. So again, well done everyone. I mean, this is, a lot of times we focus a lot on the past, and the past is, very scary if you think too much about it. And, we focus a lot on the future, which is also very scary, and we certainly can't take this for granted. But today is a lot about honestly focusing on the present, and, the present is really pretty incredible in this region that we all share. Here's another thing to focus on, and that is that the Bay Area actually is outperforming its peer regions in terms of the GDP per capita growth over the course of the past few years, which is the measure of productivity. So how much have we been growing per the number of people that are in the area? And you see we're in the upper right-hand side of the chart, which is generally where you want to be. This is a happy chart, so that's where we want to be. And that is really a big part of the key of the success in the Bay Area. As Kunal mentioned earlier, the Bay Area is much more than just software. The Bay Area is much more than just social media. The Bay Area has a lot of tech-enabled activity, but that activity is across a range of different industries, especially industries with very high productivity growth, information, but also healthcare and professional and scientific. We have a broad range of industries here. I do a lot of work in healthcare. We have a lot of exciting healthcare companies here in the Bay Area. If you can turn off your TV, never read the newspaper, and not get all that terribly depressing news about healthcare, and actually focus on the healthcare companies that we have in the Bay Area and the extent to which they're really doing a fantastic job of implementing online appointments and coordinating better across the different parts of the healthcare industry. There's a lot of positives in terms of that industry here in the Bay Area. We're extraordinarily innovative in healthcare as well, and that's just one example for the region. How's this seeming to you folks at this point? Is there anything that sort of rings true, or that you have a specific question about before I keep jawing at you? Any members of the team that want to jump in with yeah?
Yeah, I'm going to do you a favor real quick though. And you can keep going.
Okay. All right. The cursor was in the way. All right. Well, this is why you have a vice president. All right. One of the big keys to the Bay Area's success is our educational attainment, and that's sort of one of the most important things to understand about why different regions are economically successful. So you look at Texas and California, and in some ways you couldn't possibly find more different states from the perspective of industry mix and state policy and so on, yet somehow the Bay Area and the Austin area are almost identical. And a lot of that and a lot of the economic success of the Bay Area and of Austin doesn't have to do with the state environment, but has to do with the educational attainment of the people who are there. So these areas, the Bostons, the Bay Areas, the Austins, the Seattles, that do very well, it has a tremendous amount to do with the educational attainment. But here's an important piece of this, and a piece of this that I'm pretty excited about, which is that although we do import a lot of talent from around the country and from around the world, the percent of those with a bachelor's degree that are actually born here in the home state of California is higher than in some of those other areas. So there are a lot of people from California, from the Bay Area, that are those highly educated people that are doing well here in the Bay Area. We produce some of the most entrepreneurial graduates in the world. Stanford, UC Berkeley, Cal State East Bay, and I'm going to get in trouble because I know we have a lot of educational institutions in the room and I should name them all. But these educations of higher institution, many of which are members of the Bay Area Council, really are just such an important engine of economic development for the region and for the state. And so if we're thinking about where our investment dollars marginally should go, just from the perspective of economic growth, vibrancy, and resilience, we would really invest primarily in higher education here in the Bay Area. That's the mechanism which is the creation of the economic growth. There's a lot of other places that we should invest because it's the right thing to do, and it's certainly important as a foundation of the economy and of the communities that we have here. But I think that we, and perhaps this is a function of state policy, really don't understand how much we ought to be investing in the Cal State system and the community college system, and especially in these major universities here in the Bay Area, because higher education really does help power our economic success. And then here's the, this is another one of those put your hands up and leave the room type statistics. So this is the number of patents issued in the Bay Area, and there really isn't a close second. And that's the beauty of the Bay Area, is that we have managed to be the hub of the international innovation economy since the 1970s, which is, I don't like to think about how long ago that is, but it turns out it's, that's become a while ago now, the 1970s. And one question has always been, as these other innovation economies emerge, and Sean Randolph's work has had a lot to do with this. Sean, can you tell us a little bit about, there was this concern that we would lose ground, but what has actually happened?
In fact, we've been gaining ground, contrary to what a lot of people might have thought a few years ago. As Micah said, we're continuing to see a remarkable inflow of global companies, leading companies from across the world, from Europe in particular, from China, from Japan, and elsewhere, that are opening up innovation offices and R&D centers in the Bay Area. We're seeing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of entrepreneurs and startups from everywhere in the world coming into the Bay Area to be part of this economy. And so I think it just goes to show the kind of the continued magnetic attraction of this region for, again, very smart people and very innovative companies that come here to kind of take advantage and leverage our resources, which Mike outlined, but also to be part of this innovation conversation, which is pretty much any industry you can think of, anything touched by digitalization, which is everything, is taking place here first before anywhere else in the world.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sean. And we've had maybe too much good news, so let's throw a little bad news. And this initially looks like good news. Our median wages here in the Bay Area outpace any other region. One of the things, many of you know about the Economic Institute, the independent research arm of the Bay Area Council. We have a cross-sector leadership board that includes executives from the council, some of which are in the room, Mike Covarrubias of TMG Partners being one of them. There are others, but we also have a lot of partners. So Ann Wilson, who runs United Ways of the Bay Area, is on our board and one of our important partners. And Ann, I hope you don't mind, there are some caveats to the higher median income in the Bay Area. So what is it that's important to understand about what that income gets us?
That's kind of like a catch, right?
Yeah, right?
Well, for one thing, we do know that it makes it very difficult for teachers and nurses and social workers and all the people who provide community services to our region to live here. And to have wages that are livable. We also know that 1 out of 4 families struggle to make ends meet, that the definition of the real cost of living in the Bay Area is extraordinary, and it makes for a very difficult path for a whole lot of families. And there are lots of obstacles to that. So there's many, many dimensions of this that are wonderful, and not all people have this equal path to opportunity and prosperity and enjoying all the opportunities of the Bay Area.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. That's important. I mean, it's more money in nominal terms, but the money doesn't go as far here as many of you know. So I thought I'd throw that in there. So this is also something that Kunal mentioned. We did an analysis that we'd like to update, looking at the number of jobs in other parts of the United States that are directly tied to Bay Area headquartered employers. Now, I think on some level, this is not the more interesting way of thinking about the Bay Area's influence. If you think about the fact that the tech of everything is being created here, obviously the Bay Area has an impact on the livelihoods and the lives of basically every person in the entire world, just Facebook, Google, and some of our other companies. But there are also jobs that these Bay Area headquartered employers have, and I think that this is accelerating, but as of a few years ago, you look at there are almost 300,000 jobs in Texas linked to Bay Area headquartered employers. And this is also something that I think is extraordinarily important to understand about the economy, which I think everybody in this room understands, but that we may need to educate some folks, political decision makers, more broadly about. The economy is not an us versus them game. When California does well, Texas does well. When the United States does well, China does well. There are international and national connections, supply chains, and we can work out things, agreements that have mutual benefit. And if we think about the economic development as a zero-sum battle to the death between Texas and California, it's not going to work out for Texas, it's not going to work out for California, and likewise with our international partners. So this is just part of showing that the Bay Area is really connected to many of the rest of the state and regional economies around the world. And we'd like to update these numbers because we believe, through at this point relatively anecdotal evidence, that these numbers are growing throughout the United States as Bay Area headquartered companies make increasing investments around the country. Another thing that you will often hear is that Fortune 500 headquarters are fleeing the Bay Area. That is not in fact true. The Bay Area has been holding steady in terms of the number of Fortune 500 headquarters. Now, there's been some movement in that list. We actually have been creating Fortune 500 companies here in the Bay Area. So as some of our tech companies have gotten a little smaller, some of our tech companies have gotten a little larger. And that's exactly what you want to see. Another thing that I think is often missed about the international economy and the national economy is that we have a fear of dynamism. We have a fear of anyone leaving, and we shouldn't. Companies are going to make decisions about where to site. Companies are going to move their headquarters. Companies are going to do this and that. And often in the paper we hear about how the company is left, but we don't hear about the 3 companies that have come in behind it. And actually that dynamism, that moving around of companies and of people and of ideas is what powers the Bay Area economy. And on net, we're doing well measured by the number of Fortune 500 headquarters. Kunal also talked about the diversity of Bay Area industries. We're well diversified across consumer products, energy, financial services, tech, and others. Obviously very strong in tech, but tech isn't everything there is to the Bay Area economy. And many of those tech companies reach out into lots of other industries across the Bay Area. Here's a measure of the amount of market cap by industry. And one of the things that I mean, we sort of all know this at this point, but 4 of the top 10 global companies by market capitalization are headquartered in the Bay Area. That is an enormous big deal. We've created a couple of those companies over the course of the past couple of decades. And so when you look at, not only are we keeping pace with the number of companies that are headquartered here as Fortune 500s, but our Fortune 500 companies, especially the biggest ones, are the best ones. So congratulations to everybody, including Bay Area Council Economic Institute board member Rebecca Prozant from Google. So,
Michael, where would sales?
All by myself, Michael.
Yeah, that's all you. Where does Salesforce fall into this list? So Salesforce is new to the Fortune 500 list. So that's one of the big companies that we've grown recently here in the Bay Area.
There are 104, 150.
There are 104 on the list?
No, there are 104 market.
Oh, 104, yeah. And who's got the next one? Is there anyone here in the Bay Area that's got their sights set on the Fortune 500? We'll see, and it's very exciting. There is a statistic that over the course of the last 20 years, the entire European Union has created, what is it, Sean? Just only a couple of, or maybe only one new Fortune 500 company, whereas the Bay Area, we've had some dynamism of people, entering and leaving, has created dozens. We've seen a lot of growth in high technology jobs since the end of the Great Recession. Actually, the Great Recession was really only a little bump in the road here in the Bay Area. Now, there was something that you folks might remember, the dot-com crash. And just briefly, we're not inoculated from national or international business cycles here, but we can experience them very differently. And our experience of the dot-com crash was very different than our experience of the Great Recession. And I believe that because our economy is vastly more diversified now, that our experience of the next economic downturn is more likely to be like our experience of the Great Recession than our experience of the dot-com crash, which we were sort of responsible for by making a bunch of imaginary companies with sock puppets as spokespeople. But we've gotten our act together since then and really have a pretty amazing, pretty diverse economy. Patrick, do you want to say anything more about the importance of technology jobs? Because yeah, you were one of the authors of a study we did a little while ago. We're looking at these technology jobs in isolation, but what are the impact of technology jobs on the broader economy?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think a few things. One, you can see that previous chart. The jobs are, at this point steadily increasing. Actually, the last few months in that chart, you start to see a jump in them. And actually, if we had newer data, the jumps would probably even be greater. Those jobs, many of them are extremely well-paying, all those sorts of things. But what they also do is create just over 4 jobs in the rest of the economy for each one of them. And those jobs aren't just service sector jobs. They're not just waiters and baristas and all those types of things. Actually, 40% of them are professional jobs in other fairly high-paying industries. Finance professionals, lawyers, doctors, all that kind of stuff. So that's another pretty big driver of our economy. Folks think that, yeah, sure, these guys, we made some caterers for their lunches, or we had some people charge up their scooters or whatever. But that's actually not exactly the case.
Yeah.
And then, like you see here, we have quite a bit more of these jobs in other comparable regions. San Jose and San Francisco are split up here because we did the 2 MSAs that are in the Bay Area. But as you can see, San Jose has effectively 2.4 times the number of technology jobs as the US average. So, I mean, and each of those jobs creating 4.3 other jobs is where you start to see that we've really started to pull away from many other economies across the country.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. We should maybe rename that report that you wrote, Everyone Needs Lawyers, to have people understand tech jobs also create lawyers. So it's not just the software
Financiers too.
Financiers. Everyone needs financiers. Everyone needs healthcare. Everyone needs...
Maybe not that tough.
All right. So here's another thing that we really wanted to highlight, which is that our region's largest companies are making substantial investments in this region. Yes, they are also creating jobs elsewhere in the United States, and by the way, that's a very good thing, not only economically, but also politically for the Bay Area to be tied to more of the economies in the United States. But this is a map of Apple, Facebook, and Google's commitments in terms of square feet of development all up and down the Bay Area, especially focused on San Jose. And that's something that's really important to understand, which is that these large companies, our large companies, are making major investments in our region. Another measure of, another measure is that quite a number of the sales are coming from that. But one of the other things that we wanted to highlight is that we have a lot of large companies here in the Bay Area that, if they were public, would be Fortune 500 companies. So examples of that are Uber, Airbnb, and Lyft. And Uber and Airbnb and Lyft aren't just important because they're large, they're also important because they are revolutionizing industries. So that isn't a .com play or a software play, it's really having a huge impact on how we do mobility, it's having a huge impact on how we do lodging across the United States. And Jeff, you actually just got a chance to go down and learn a little bit more about some of Uber's more in the blue sky plans for mobility. Do you want to tell the group a little bit about that conference you went to?
Yeah, I guess flying cars are coming. So they've got a Uber Elevate platform that actually may have some applicability here. Think about traveling between San Francisco and San Jose. It's those type of long distances via congested corridors that maybe don't have a great transit option. So they're looking at Dallas, LA, and that 101 corridor. But that's a couple of years off, but that's kind of the wave of the future.
How many times did people quote the Back to the Future, where we're going, we don't need roads, during that conference that you went to?
They were very excited.
Yeah, they're very excited about it. All right, so, you know, that's, I mean, and here's another thing, and this is the, you know, total share of venture capital within the Bay Area is, you know, versus the rest of the United States. And, you know, we've been bringing in, you know, more than a third of the total venture capital in the United States in just these 9 counties. As recently as 2015, it was almost half of total venture capital. And that's a big part of what powers the Bay Area economy. You know, when you know, people like Mark Zuckerberg think about creating Facebook and they, you know, come to California, they don't just come here because we're all so cool. They also come here because there is really unparalleled access to capital for development. One of the interesting trends recently has been that although we've been holding steady in terms of our total amount of venture capital, that there's been a little bit of a downward trend in terms of the number of deals as these deals have gotten bigger and we've made more investments in later stages of larger companies here in the Bay Area. And we're investing in many of the highest productivity industries. This is the kind of data that you can pore over as you're falling asleep over the course of the next couple of weeks. But it's not just that we have venture capital, but that it's going into AI and machine learning, but life sciences, big data, and fintech, and elsewhere. So across a range of different industries, really revolutionizing those industries. So here we get to the some of the challenges and some of the caveats. You know, the cost of living in the Bay Area is growing more quickly than our median wage increases. So there actually have been increases in median wages here in the Bay Area recently, but the cost of living is really outpacing those increases. And here is the issue of the fact that our population is growing much more slowly. So we're outpacing our peer regions in terms of wages, GDP, household income, employment, productivity, but we're not keeping up in terms of our amount of population growth here in the 9-county Bay Area. Kunal mentioned this a little bit, but Mr. Megaregion, do you want to say a little bit more about what that means? Maybe that statistic isn't quite what it seems on its face.
Well, I think if you look at the population growth across the entire mega region, which we define as 21 counties, so out to Lake Tahoe, down through the northern San Joaquin Valley, we move closer to that peer average because you see those kind of collar counties being an entry point, especially for middle wage, even low wage type of people looking to move into the Bay Area. They're moving to places like Tracy or Stockton or Merced and then commuting in. I don't want to steal your future slides, but I'm sure we've got a couple on that too.
Yeah, no, but that's something that's really important to understand. You know, as mentioned, I just want to kind of drive this home because I want this to be one of your big takeaways from this. The people that are leaving the Bay Area are not necessarily going to, I mean, some of them are going to Texas, but on net, the Northern California megaregion, these 22 counties are actually growing in population. So that's a big part of the story because a lot of the reporting ends up being just on these 9 counties. Do we have any companies in the room that have footprint in the megaregion outside of the 9 counties, or anybody in the room that has interests out there? Well, it's very common. Obviously, a lot of our
We have an office in Sacramento.
the Bay Area Council has an office in Sacramento, and increasingly is doing a lot of partnerships with Sacramento, with the Northern California megaregion, with Fresno. Jim, why would a organization like the Bay Area Council that has historically been committed to the 9 counties of the Bay Area be interested in the mega region and in helping promote economic development in Sacramento?
Well, in the spirit of bad cop, we failed at keeping up the pace and what we needed to build within the Bay Area. And so we're left with a strategy that probably isn't the most desirable approach to this, which is to sprawl out, which other regions have done. And it's not necessarily a bad thing if you are able to provide the infrastructure that you need to be able to accommodate that. So, what we are seeing now is you have the population growth taking place in San Joaquin County, Stanislaus County, Sacramento County, Yolo County, without the concomitant mass transit opportunity. So what we have is it's a massive driver commute, which is it's probably not a sustainable, or it's certainly not a desirable thing. So what we're thinking is, look, we've been trying for a long time to increase particularly housing development in the region. And we're not keeping up with the numbers. Probably also the MTC report that shows, just how far we're lagging in most cities. And we can keep believing that that's all about to change. And I think there are some positive signs in some places. But I would say there are, the reasons that we're failing need to be more closely examined. I think we're putting up reasons why we think we're not achieving this, which may not be the real reasons. We should probably better understand it. My guess is that we've just got misaligned incentives between the cities, which actually permit the housing, and the folks who want to develop it. And we need to think about that. And it's a big question, and it's not an easy thing to solve. So, the bottom line is that we're left with a solution. The best solution for us is at least partially to rely on the ability to see places like Tracy and Stockton and Lodi and Sacramento as being within part of an economic boundary that includes the Bay Area. It's a different way of thinking. I think we're making progress on getting people to think this way, and this report provides another opportunity for folks to see the reality of what's taking place. And just yesterday we had our transportation committee meeting, and we had we had 2 presentations. One from Brian Kelly, who runs he's the CEO of the California High-Speed Rail Authority, as well as a fellow who is currently running the rail portion of Caltrans, mass transit and rail for Caltrans, who took us through the state rail program. So, if you add funding to the mix over the next 10 to 15 years, we could see a very vibrant network system of rail running at average, not including the high-speed rail, at 125 miles an hour, that could make this seemingly really large region a lot smaller. And that's our goal, and that's not going to solve the whole problem, but it's definitely part of the solution.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's, and then we will do what every other serious region in the rest of the world has done, 5 to 50 years ago. So I hope that we get there, but that won't put us ahead of the pack. That'll just catch us up with some of what's happening elsewhere. Yes, ma'am.
I'm on the Menlo Park City Council, and to support what you're saying in more blunt terms, I was elected in 2012 through the whole .com, the growth of the Bay Area, all this. Before 2013, the last anything that was built larger than a duplex in Menlo Park was in 1974. They have communities, they're not in my backyard. The problem is, let me tell you about politicians. They want votes, and when the people elect who they think is going to do what the people want, and the majority of the people in Menlo Park did not want housing. Ironically, the same people that yell at me about having no affordable housing and no place for their kids to live when they come back from college are the same people that threaten me within an inch of my life if I approve Facebook having more housing, or anyone else. But we've approved over 2,000 units, and we've got a few more thousand units that we're approving now in Menlo Park. And so it's kind of like this to this, which I can only do because I don't want to be a politician. I don't care. I'm just I'm on city council to try and fix this. But you have other people who do want to be politicians, who do want to you know, go to the state assembly, and they worry about being perceived as being in the pockets of the developers and all this. And so you can do all the funding, you can do all the zoning, you can do all whatever. What we really need to do is get that message out to the voters.
Yeah.
That this is actually going to make traffic better. This is actually going to make life better, to build housing. Look at Palo Alto. You had city council that were actually beginning to build housing, and then that pendulum swung back, and the NIMBYs are back in power.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. The pendulum keeps swinging, and we don't get stuff built.
Yeah.
And it really comes down to getting the politicians in place to allow it to be built.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, round of applause, thank you for the work you did. You know, Mike?
So I don't know if you want to do the bad cops all in a row.
Are you?
But, so I do real estate development, so in my business, the only time that doesn't count is today. Kind of the opposite of what you were saying. This isn't what counts. What counts is what's around the corner for us. So we're looking 2, 3, 5 years down the road. And I think I give that speech whenever a capital partner comes to town. This is the greatest economy on the planet, it'll never get worse. Inside, however, I think we all recognize that black swan that we all are afraid of is a little bit of this cost of living. Today, coincidentally, NBC News came out with their top 50 states, I think we had to prove all of them, for business friendly, and number 1 was Texas. And we ranked number 25. And reasonable. Yeah, we got 25 are worse than us for business friendly attitude. And but in that, if you look at the numbers in between, what was the jump out the page was cost of living. So California is slightly better than Hawaii apparently for cost of living. So it was number 2. It was number 8 in terms of business friendly. And so I think the question is, if you look at some of the policies that could come out of this next few years, whether it's the immigration and the visa program, which makes it difficult for us to get folks, whether it's the, and I think a couple of folks, Ann particularly mentioned, you know, our people who are making money and doing well and are excited about that are doing that. It's the first responders, it's the teachers, it's the caretakers who are on freeway systems that take 3 hours a day to get back and forth, sometimes one way. And so I think that I'm all for the positiveness of this report, because it is what it is. It's unbelievable. But I think our job is we have to think about those other downsides. I said when I was the chair of this council a couple years ago, and I said the first meeting, I said, I think our black swan is growing in a little nest in the corner, and it's the housing costs. And it's the fact that the disparity of homeless versus the mega billionaires. And that issue is not getting better, and it's exactly what you said about city councils. And so it's just an ongoing battle. And I think while we revel in that part of the economy, thank God that's working, and thank God we're the envy of the world, and thank God all those companies want to be here. 10 years from now, if we don't do something different, whether it's getting the transportation to get people back and forth easier, whether it's coming up with the state having the guts to enforce some housing policies, which is not easy. We'll be reading all those articles that you referenced that, man, this is a hard place to do business, and it's a hard place to have people who want to come fight the fire and teach the kids. So I'm thrilled, and as I said, I usually give that speech when capital partners come to town, how great this place is. But it's really important that all of us not lose focus, that there are some serious misalignments, whether they're at the city council level or at all the transportation agencies we have, 27? 28. Probably grew one while we were having this meeting. But anyway, so I'm not trying to be the Debbie Downer, but I think it's important that in the middle of the euphoria, which this kind of report does lead to, because it's all euphoric.
Well, I think, I completely agree with you, and, obviously this is the #1 issue for the council and something that we've been working on for a long period of time. There's also been a change. like, maybe it's not enough in Menlo Park, but there has been more development in Menlo Park than there was in a generation. There's more development in Oakland right now than there has been in a generation. It's not enough, we're a generation behind, but we've gotten to the point, and this is like my rhetorical thing. I spent a lot of time in Marin, in the North Bay. And the conversation has moved from no to what does your yes sound like, right? Tell me what housing you think should be built in your community, and let's work together on making that happen.
And the answer's still
And
zero.
the answer is, I mean, you know,
Still
look
zero.
at, so
That's
we're
a bad
doing a
example.
lot of,
Try another county.
but even in Marin, the conversation is, well, do accessory dwelling units make sense?
Yeah.
Does filling the missing middle, you know? So a duplex is twice as many houses as a single family home.
By the way, the accessory dwelling unit is a perfect example that the state got it right.
Yeah.
We passed legislation, this council was a driver, and now the cities are forced to allow, without, you know, CEQA and all that other stuff, to build ADUs. And they're now doing a second shot at it, which, by the way, we should jump up and yell yes about, to allow you to actually build a small building in the back, not just convert your.
Right. Yeah.
You are correct, but that's state-driven. If you ask a city person, they'll say removal of local authority. But as I always say, how's it working so far? So you're right, the ADU stuff is a perfect example. It can be done.
Yeah.
You have to assume it's a disaster and then go try to solve
Yeah.
it.
No, that's cool. I'm just playing, you know, I'm the good cop, and then you're the guy
I got it.
pacing
That's why I
behind
said-
and
that's why I
like
said.
knocking over the chair, and I'm like, you don't want to talk to that Mike Covarrubias guy. We better grin. We better work this out between ourselves because he's coming for you.
You bet.
All right. So the one of the things that is important to balance in the Bay Area, we do have a lot of assets, and one of the important assets is our natural land. So Patrick Kellerman did a report last year. We partnered with the Green Belt Alliance, with the Bay Area Open Space Council, on the looking at how to get, well, what was the punchline of that report? You wouldn't expect the Bay Area Council and the Bay Area
It might
Open
sound a
Space.
little counterintuitive to talk about this after Covarrubias has kicked over the chairs
Hey.
and all the stuff Micah said.
You're doing a fine job. Keep it.
Yeah, we wrote this report last year with the Green Belt Alliance and Bay Area Open Space Council. And you know, the real finding was one of the things that makes the Bay Area great is the ability to live and work near such beautiful places, and the compromise that can be had that kind of gives us the best of both worlds is, surprise, you know, smart growth, infill, that type of thing. You know, you see some of these red areas that are at high risk, you know, further out on the fringes. These are usually areas easier to develop, but what happens if you put a bunch of housing out there is you get more pressure on the transportation infrastructure, you get more traffic, you get more all that kind of stuff. To the best of our ability, if we can continue to build in priority development areas and those type of things more smartly, we can keep, you know, what makes it, one of the main things that makes this region so great, while also fulfilling housing demand. So.
Yeah, I love the mega region.
Okay.
I'm on your side.
One of the challenges, though, of having so much building, which is not in the core Bay Area and not doing a good job of jobs housing balance, is that the state is off target to meet its environmental goals around the development, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And most of those are created by cars sitting in traffic. If they're sitting in traffic on the Altamont Pass, because we're not building as much as we need to be building in the Bay Area, then we're not going to meet those goals. And that's a really important part of, again, really hopefully locking arms with the more progressive parts, well, not what who call themselves progressive, actually progressive, helpful and constructive parts of the environmental community to work on this. So we, as I mentioned earlier, the equity and the inclusion of more people in prosperity in the Bay Area is an extremely important priority for the Economic Institute for the Bay Area Council. This is a map essentially that shows that not only is this prosperity not broadly shared across every type of person within the economy, but also there's a geographic differential to that prosperity. And so you can see that there are lower median household incomes in that Northern California mega region. So not only are people commuting a longer distance, but it's generally people, in the sort of middle and service level that are commuting in from the broader Bay Area. There are also differentials across different ethnic groups. Now, this is something that's sort of interesting, which is to say that Asian Americans actually have higher median incomes in the Bay Area than do Caucasians, right? So the whole conversation about this doesn't necessarily reflect the subtlety of the data. There are still definitely large groups that have vastly lower levels of income in the Bay Area. Before we totally wrap up for the day, we're going to go through a couple more slides, but I wanted to make sure to take the time to thank some of our supporters. We have thanked a McKinsey & Company that's an important knowledge partner of ours, but this report also had a few financial supporters, some of which are in the room. So thank you so much to Wells Fargo for your support, to Sam Sita, Roseanne Faust, a member of the Bay Area Council Economic Institute Board for quite a while, and one of those brave, bold politicians that made the right choice about development in Redwood City. And PwC, and then the North Bay Leadership Council run by Cynthia Murray, all financial supporters of this project. So thank you so much for that. Let's see, we have terrible traffic. I want to just end with a few, do you guys need another presentation on how challenging the traffic is here in the Bay Area? Let's, it's bad, okay.
One of the things that you have with that, though, and you guys came to our office once and mentioned it, was that there's 27 different transit agencies.
Right.
Is there any way that maybe the focus of the council could be to lobby to get those combined, like New York?
Yeah. So we've certainly, I've written now several reports that have recommended that, but unfortunately, not all of the recommendations of I don't know if I should even say this. Not every recommendation in an Economic Institute report immediately becomes law. It's tough, right? Because so short answer, yes, that is something that we advocate for. That's obviously something that is going to require some changes at the state level, perhaps even some changes at the federal level to give more power to the metropolitan planning organizations. So we are in the process of looking at a major project in that area to sort of top up our advocacy there. There are, I think, opportunities around the high-speed rail authority and the extent to which different regional rail systems are connecting, but also in the interim, we're working hard to try to get those agencies, because you kind of have to have two strategies, right? Ideally, you would merge them, but in the interim, you try to get them to play better together. So we've been doing a lot of work, and a lot of that work has had to do with the mega regional rail networks. So, in the Northern California mega region, you have a number of different rail operators, and they don't necessarily connect to the other rail operators where and when you would want them to. So we're kind of pursuing these on.
If I could comment, so this is something that's been talked about for a long time, and the fellow who runs the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, Steve Heminger, tried to do this a few years ago. He wrote an editorial about how the public expects more for its money. He convened a group. I was on the group. It included the heads of most of the major transit agencies, and they hired Parsons Brinkerhoff, which has a new name now, to do the analysis. And they basically were able to show a lot of the inefficiencies and the cost savings and benefits that could occur. And you had to be there to see the reaction of these agencies, right, who live to live, as well as the unions who represent the, a couple of unions who represent the workers, and a few people like me who were on the committee were deeply, completely outnumbered. and nothing came of it. It was about a 2-year process of going to meetings, and after about, not too long, you could tell this wasn't going to go far. What we've been doing is working with a group to try to think about the future of Bay Area transportation on a number of fronts, and Regional Measure 3, which just passed a few weeks ago, which is, by the way, being sued by the Howard Jarvis group, is thinking big about the future of transportation, as they've been doing in Los Angeles, to come up with what we call a mega measure, like mega region, but it's largely for this region. It could be bigger geographically, to really infuse the region with the resources it would need to materially change transportation. And part of doing that, LA has put about $120 billion in 2 separate measures that they passed, and we're not near that. Part of doing that might be we need to really think about the change in governance. This 2720, it is actually 20. We did add another agency, so there's 28 agencies now, and think about how we could combine at least some of it, make it network together better to the extent that we can't get rid of it. We can't make it uniform. There are some labor issues as to why you may not want to get rid of them all, because under the federal law you have to pay the higher rates of pay. When you merge them, you actually can get more costly rather than less. So, we have to think about what's smart. But it may be time to think about this. We've brought it up a few times, so it's a really good point. And if we were to try to do it, it's going to take a major, I can tell you, it's going to just take a major push from the people of the Bay Area, the political leadership, to say, hey, look, we've got to find a better way. I think it's part of what I try to say in the beginning is the way we've been going at stuff isn't working, and we need to think of different ways to do it. So
yeah,
maybe
and I think that's a really good place to end our conversation for today. The understanding that these data don't exist in a vacuum. The reason why people like myself are working at the Bay Area Council Economic Institute are because we believe that the data can matter. We believe that people can be convinced by not only charts, but really stories. So here we have the number of people commuting in from different parts of the mega region. The raw numbers are what they are, but really what I want to call people's attention to here is the spiking. So over the course of the past 3 years, is that, Jeff? Over the course of the past 3 years, we have a 27% increase in the number of people driving in from the San Joaquin Valley. What you know, if you know about traffic, is that it actually doesn't take that many more marginal people to make traffic substantially worse, and it doesn't take that many more cars off the road to make traffic substantially better. So there are these kind of tipping points that you see that are there. So I hope that you think about the Economic Institute as your resource for data analysis, your resource for policy considerations that really help drive these conversations and these efforts that the Bay Area Council is helping to lead, along with its partners, along with so many of you, because that is really what's going to make the difference in our region and make the difference from people really for their quality of life, because it's one thing to say 27%, but every single part of that 27% is somebody sitting in the parking lot that is the Altamont Pass for 8 hours of the day, right? So ultimately this comes back to the people and the lives and the experiences that create these data. We put together a report, really appreciate McKinsey's partnership in it. They're helping us put together the data. Really appreciate all the sponsors of the report, the media that's helping us get it out into the world. And the efforts of our colleagues at the Bay Area Council alongside of us to really push some of these better policy outcomes for the region, because yes, things are really pretty amazing right now, but ultimately we're a 75-year-old organization that's going to be here for more than 75 years. We know that there will be economic downturns. We know that there'll be threats to this amazing prosperity right now, and we appreciate your partnership working together with us to think about the future. So thank you so much for coming this morning. And please visit bayareaeconomy.org if you want to download these charts, get all this information, see our other reports, or follow us at Bay Area Economy. Thanks.